Hello and welcome to Events Dear Boy, the podcast for anyone involved in business events. If you're a conference producer, corporate event organiser, or events agency, then we're here for you. We want to share the highs and the lows, the best practices and the horror stories. You can expect ideas and inspiration, and maybe some laughs too.
And if you're a speaker at these events, then we're here for you too. We'll be talking about how you do it, what makes speakers nervous, and how it feels when it all goes well or terribly.
My name is Catherine McNamara and I'm the marketing lead at the talent agency Pomona Partners and someone who has organised many business events in my working life. Alongside me is Pomona Partners founder and a veteran of 1,000 speaking gigs, Tom Cheesewright.
I really must count one day and work out if it is 1,000.
1,000,000.
Each episode, we're joined by a guest from the business event space, either an organiser or a speaker. We'll ask them to share their experiences, both good and bad, and their tips for other people in their positions. This is the first episode. Oh no, it's not the first episode of season 2, is it? Or is it the first episode of season 2? I've lost track.
We'll never know.
Anyway, this is season 2. So there are already 10 episodes featuring incredible guests for you to go back and listen to or watch if you haven't seen them already. And there's a little wrap up where Catherine and I talk about what we've learned and what has made us laugh from season 1.
And this week, I'm delighted to say that we're joined by Julia Phillips. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you very much, both.
We are delighted to have you here. So let's take our launch point. Tell us a little bit about your role.
So I am the owner and event director at Potting Shed Events. We've been going about 3 years, just over 3 years. We're 3 in June, just gone.
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, we had a cake and everything with candles. But I've been in the events industry for north of 30 years. We won't count, Tom, to your point of podcast, we definitely won't count. But yes, north of 30 years, and this is the second agency that I have owned. The first I sold in 2019. Some might say I had a crystal ball. It did not, thankfully. But yeah, back up in 2021, and we are now 3. So I kind of head up all of the whole team. We're a small team. We're 4 people in total, with then some freelancers and permalancers in the mix as well. And I take care of predominantly operational. So that's my background, is very much operational, but also sliding into kind of account management and new business development as well.
Very good.
Fantastic. And what kind of events do you put together, Julia? What's both for your 3-year-old and your previous business as well?
Oh, it's all the same. It's all the same, Catherine. Once I find a groove, I stay in it. We say very clearly that we only do corporate events, but along the way we seem to have attracted a couple of private clients. But we predominantly are creative logistics experts. So we look at conferences, incentives, senior leadership retreats. We do quite a lot of team events. So I write a lot of team games, and we partner with a number of 5-star estates in the southeast of England. We operate all over the world. We don't tend to, it's probably quicker to say what we don't do. We don't tend to get involved in corporate hospitality in any way, shape or form. There are excellent agencies out there who do that very well. So we would palm that off. We are B2B exclusively. So again, B2C inquiries that come in, we tend to recommend somebody else who we know is really competent and excels in that field. We try, to my point earlier, we try and stick in our lane and really excel in what we do.
Are there particular industries or particular types of company you found a real niche with, or people who keep coming back?
So there's a little bit of a myth, I believe, in that once you work with one industry, that industry is required that you then work in that industry and you niche down. And I know there are excellent agencies who do predominantly pharmaceutical or automotive or whatever. We generally believe that we are generalists, so we are logistics experts, and it doesn't matter who you are, the fundamentals of running an event and operating an event are the same across. There are some nuances. So in pharmaceutical work, you'd have the ABPI guidelines, which if you're not familiar with them, they take forever to get to know, and they change and update and modify on a regular basis. So
Wow.
We tend to be quite cautious if we are moving into a new industry, just to make sure that we understand the parameters in which we're operating. But no, we operate in tech, finance, retail, all over the space.
Wow. What about the the bits of the job? I mean, you've been quite clear about which bits are your specialism. What do you really love doing, and similarly, what do you not like doing so much?
What are the things I put off on my to-do list, do you mean?
Yeah.
Um, I love seeing a program come together. Very, for those people of a certain age, very B.A. Baracus or no, Hannibal, wasn't it? I love it when a plan comes together. I love seeing the result of what we do, of seeing an event go really, really well, of seeing an audience engaged, of seeing guests really enthused and motivated. I come from it always from the point of view of my father worked in advertising, and he worked in advertising in the glory years of advertising. And he used to come home and complain bitterly that he was forced to go to company conferences, team away days, do team building and all these sorts of things. And he just wanted to be at home when he wasn't at work. He wanted to do his job and then come home. So that he's always the delegate I have in mind when I devise any game or when we come up with any kind of agenda, when we're supporting any clients, because I think it is a very necessary part. I think live events form a huge connection opportunity for companies, particularly now when lots of people are working hybrid and remotely and so on and so forth. And since the COVID, as my child would call it, I think we have a real job to play in terms of making that workforce and helping that workforce be cohesive. But equally, there's the balance of people do have lives, and I'm a business owner. So for me, my day starts and ends with thinking about my work. But that's not the case for everybody. Certainly the case for, I probably hazard a guess, over 50% of the workforce is not as engaged and invested in their role as their senior leadership team or the business owner. So it's our job really to find that balance. So those are the bits I love. I love that. The bits I struggle with are, I really struggle with people who don't appreciate the value that we can add. And I don't mean that in I want to be thanked and rewarded and, glorified in some sort of way. I mean that if you engage an event agency, you are engaging them for their skill and expertise. And of course, we don't know everything. And of course, you know your group better than us. But if you ask for our advice on something and then you blatantly ignore that advice and then complain when the event goes wrong because you ignored that advice, I find that frustrating. And not from you said, I said sort of perspective. But, my only interest is making sure the event goes well. My secondary interest is making sure the event goes so well that you never ever want to change event agencies and you want to stay with us forever. So I'm not giving you advice for the sake of my health. I'm not giving you advice so that you can turn around and ignore it. I'm doing it because I genuinely believe that that's the best way to run that particular element of the event. And I think the most frustrating thing is organisers who believe that, right, we've got this 24 hours of people and we need to get everything in, and they cram this event full of content, and then people don't have time enough to go to the loo, they don't have time enough to grab a coffee, they're constantly checking their emails kind of underneath the table because they haven't been given a long enough break to do that. And that I find frustrating more than I suppose I don't like.
Yeah. So, I mean, especially with your years of experience, you'd think people might start to listen.
A little bit, and I think it's we subcontract things out, so we don't do production, we don't do AV, we don't own kit in that sense. We work with very strategic partners in that, and we would always listen to their advice, and sometimes it's not possible and sometimes we have to adapt it, and we also try and make sure that they're constantly pushing and not just going for the easiest route, but they are experts in their field, so why would you not listen to them? It's like trying to make a chef create a menu that's uber creative and uber amazing, but actually the chef's never done anything more than the menu that they have produced. And there's a reason for that, because it's good and it works and it's fine. You need to listen to where they're comfortable to be pushed and not just push people for the sake of pushing people. What slips down my to-do list is I'm looking at it now. What slips down my to-do list is the finishing off bits, the final reconciliation, the bits that just need my final stamp. From a client perspective, all done. From an internal perspective, I mean, so clients are all fine and the events are reconciled and it's all done and dusted. it's actually finalising everything our end, archiving everything, making sure that the photos are all saved in the right folder and everyone's been shared, and all those bits and pieces that frankly we save for the quieter times because we've been incredibly busy, luckily so, in the 3 years that we've been operating. But this quiet peak times that used to be when I first started in events, just, you know, I'm used to August being nice and quiet, and that's when I do my admin. Not so much anymore, it turns out. It just doesn't seem to flow in the way it used to, in the same way that M25 traffic doesn't flow in the way it used to, I suppose. Or flow, full stop.
No, you've mentioned something there which I'd like to wind back to, because we've done quite a few of these podcasts now, and you had me at creating games. So that's obviously something that is part of that whole, I'm engaging an audience and I want them invested and I want them to be part of what is going on. Can you just talk to us a little bit about some of the creativity, some of the levers that you pull on, what informs that process, and actually how many kind of new is it like a variation on a theme, or are you literally going in and thinking we can have some fun with this?
You want costumes, don't you, Catherine?
Yes.
I want wigs. Yes, full on. So it varies is the answer, which isn't a very satisfactory answer, is it? But it slightly depends on what the client wants. Regularly we get people going, we have a senior leadership team who've done everything. They've done everything that's out there they've done. So can you come up with something new? And that then allows us really to push the envelope and go further and write something that is completely bespoke. So I wrote a few years ago a game called Survive or Thrive, which was around groups, sort of wilderness skills, forest skills, that sort of thing. They had to fetch water, they had to learn how to make fire, they had to make a shelter, that sort of style. But then throughout the game, as the game progressed, things happened. So the unexpected happened. So there was a flood, which knocked out all their crops. And they had to come together at the end of each sort of scenario as tribal leaders, and they all had to talk to each other and negotiate with each other to work out how they were going to survive as individual communities or as a group community. So that was really brand new. That wasn't something that we'd done before. That wasn't a mechanic. Other times we just get really boring answer. Sorry, I've just realised. But we get a venue come to us that goes, so we've had this client book with us. They are expecting us to have a huge amount of land, because when you drive into our venue, there's acres and acres of green space, and they want to do an outdoor activity. But actually that land is a golf course or a farm, or it's being set up for something else, or whatever the case may be. So what we tend to do there is we're tweaking and adapting an existing product to create something a little bit new, create something a little bit different. So we have a game that we run, which is based on the concept of Challenge Annika. I don't dress in lycra, it's fine. But we have a big board game, and the team have to go round and find different spaces out in the estate, and then they have to do a challenge there and come back and create points and so on and so forth. So it's very interactive, but it allows us to flex with the underground knowledge of the logistics in play at that particular property. From the client perspective, they just have a great fun game. But from the venue perspective, which is why a lot of venues tend to recommend us, because we can adapt without the client being aware that we're adapting. We can adapt to really make the most of the space that we have available.
It's interesting you mentioned Challenge Annika. I was out in Manchester last night, and I think actually she is the fashion icon that a lot of people seem to be trying to replicate right now.
Coming back round. Well, no, I maybe look for my lycra in my wardrobe then.
Between that and Treasure Hunt, that's my childhood wrapped up
Yeah,
there. Just there.
Exactly. It was such
I'll
a
throw a
brilliant
helicopter
format.
into the mix.
Yeah, you're there.
Guys, we're going to build a hospital in 12 hours.
It's the beach buggy I want, but anyway.
Yeah.
Is there an event in the recent past that you're most proud of, particularly from the last sort of 3 years?
There is proud for different reasons. So whenever I write a game and we run it for the first time, we've obviously run it, dry runs in the office, but when it runs for the first time and it goes really well and it lands really well, that's a feeling like no other. I imagine it's similar to being an actor on a stage, perhaps, and people sort of applauding. Like it's a really good feeling because you know that you've listened to the brief, you've actually achieved what you were trying to achieve. One of the things that has happened in the most recent times is that we are now getting inquiries, because we've been out and about for a little bit longer, I suppose. We're getting inquiries from people that I haven't spoken to for 10 years, coming to us and saying, oh, I loved working with you. I wonder if you would be interested in pitching for this, or I wonder if you would help us do that. So that's a really lovely accolade, I suppose. In terms of event projects, the one that sticks in my mind is, and only because it had never been done before when we did it, and to my knowledge it's not been done since. We ran a gala dinner at Borough Market in January of 2020. So at my last company, just before I left, for 1,500 people. It was cold, it was wet. If you know Borough Market, there's no roof and there's no walls.
No.
And we had 45 minutes to set it up in. So that was a huge team effort, and that really was that was quite an event high at the end of that, for sure.
And I was thinking then, what question have we just asked? Because my next question was going to be, what's your biggest event disaster? And I thought you were going to say it was 1,500 people outside of Borough Market, and it absolutely chucked it down.
It was a huge success, Catherine. What's my biggest event disaster? I'm not sure we've had one, which is again a really tame thing to say. I think it probably goes back to the events that are most or that achieve the objectives least are those where genuinely organisers just try and push too much into the time. They my favourite client is someone who comes and goes, right, we've got this time, this is the time we can have out of the office, we need to cover these messages, but outside of that we just want to give people time to network, we want to give people time together, because again, to my point earlier, in this post-pandemic world, actually these live event opportunities are for some people the only opportunity that they will have for months to see a certain other person in their company. So where that's not adhered to, where that's not listened to, I think those would be the most challenging events. Those would be the events that the audience would say was the biggest disaster. We've had other things, natural disasters. I remember a long time ago operating an event when the Iceland volcano exploded.
Oh, yeah.
Exploded.
Points if you can name it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not interested in points today. And, we had to do a whole heap of variation on that. I was running a GPS treasure trail when we announced we were at war with Afghanistan, which means that the whole of our GPS system moves west by 20 miles, or I don't know if I think that it's a random thing that it moves. So suddenly we had teams in a minibus going on the M4, and they were supposed to be in Windsor, and we were thinking, where are they going? So little challenges like that, but they all make good stories. In fact, people often say to me, when are you going to write a book about all the stories and things from an event? So yeah, no, touch wood, no disasters in the sense of disasters, but challenges for sure. That's what they pay us for, though.
Absolutely. What role do speakers play in these events? And have you had a favourite speaker to date?
Yes, I would say I have. So we tend to get involved in the flow of the agenda more than actually setting the agenda. So we're not necessarily an agency that people would come to say, hi. They might come and want us to do one external speaker, and this is the brief. This is what we want them to talk to. But we're not an agency that would craft the agenda from get-go. But we recently, in fact, I used her years ago, and we recently used her again, a lady called Deborah Searle. I don't know if you know her.
No.
She is an adventurer. She's based in Devon, and she and her ex-husband set off to cross the Atlantic in a 2-man rowing boat. And within, I think, the first 48 hours, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, he discovered he had agoraphobia. So he was airlifted off the boat, and she had never rowed before. He was the rower. I mean, she'd trained, but, she'd never done this kind of distance before. And so he was airlifted off, and she continued and did the journey across the Atlantic on her own. And we've used her a few times, and I have yet to use her without the whole audience just raving about her. She's
Amazing.
a really, really clever speaker. She's very able to adapt what she's talking about to suit. Some speakers, they come and they go, these are my slides and this is my script, and you do the 2+2. She really takes you on that journey with her. So I think that she's been incredibly good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Have to look her up. It reminds me of Sarah Fox, one of our speakers, who's currently on a tandem with her husband, riding across Europe and some slightly disputed borders.
Nice. Yes. I think it's a lot to do just to get a speaking slot, isn't it? Really? I mean, it's dedication to the cause for sure.
Very low carbon footprint, though.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
And her tandem broke on day one, didn't it?
Yeah, the tandem, literally, I think they just got into France and the tandem collapsed. So, yeah.
Oh, good
But
God.
fortunately, Annika Rice was there with her buggy with a spare tandem.
And there we go.
So Julie, what tips would you give kind of speakers if you were bringing someone in? Because that's a really kind of neat example that you're giving us there.
Yeah.
What would your tips be to speakers at your events?
Yeah, I think it's to keep it relevant. I think it's too easy to go, this is my story and this is the way I always tell it, and I think that feels to me to be very 1980s, 1990s, to kind of go, ta-da, here I am, and not be able to weave the story of the client into. I think to be concise and to leave enough space for questions, because what you find is if a speaker's really engaged an audience, the questions will just be never ending. Even if it's not questions as in putting up their hands, but the next coffee break, hang around, like speak to people afterwards in those breaks, because that's often when people who perhaps don't feel like they can ask a question publicly might come up to you and say privately, oh, that was really inspiring, or I had a question about this, that and the other. I mean, professional speakers don't need this, but we do work with a lot of CEOs, COOs, head of peoples, those sorts of people who perhaps are it's the first time they've addressed their group, and it's being brave and understanding that everybody in the room is willing you to succeed. The idea of stage nerves needs to be something that's dissipated. I mean, I appreciate that people do get nervous and you need that bit of adrenaline, but actually, very rarely now, again, we're not in the 1980s, 1990s where CEOs were vilified and so forth. Generally speaking, people are there to listen and they want to hear what you've got to say. So be brave, speak slowly, which is clearly not what I'm doing, and enjoy it. Enjoy it. This is your opportunity to really connect and engage.
It's really interesting. I speak at quite a lot of internal company events, and often you feel like the internal speakers could do with more practice, more training, more confidence, more rehearsal time. But I spoke at one the other day, and it was slightly terrifying as a professional speaker because they clearly put enormous emphasis internally on giving people that time and that training and that practice. And all of the internal speakers were absolutely excellent. It's like, wow, I've never seen something like this.
My sales director has had vocal training. So we work with a great vocal coach called Rachel Lay, and she helps speakers be present. She's actually a show caller, so she's an events background. And she's now trained in the vocal coaching, and she is phenomenal at just changing one thing. It might be a breathing pattern, it might be the tone of voice or the level of your voice or how you're standing, and just bringing that in. So often we would have her on site just helping people in the 15 minutes before they go on stage. Even you don't necessarily need months and months and months of training, but it can just really help and it makes all the difference. As an audience member, if a speaker is a good engaging speaker or if the speaker is challenging, and it doesn't matter how good their content is, if they are struggling to get that across, it can be. And equally, if they're an amazing speaker, it doesn't matter how dry their content is, you will enjoy that,
because they can still tell a story.
It's all about the storytelling.
So looking to your competition,
yes,
I guess, what tips would you give to other event organisers? Without flowing the kind of the crown jewels out.
Oh no, there's no crown jewels. I'm always
sharing and collaboration.
Exactly. I'm always happy to speak to people. I get emails probably, it's certainly weekly, if not daily sometimes, from people trying to break into the events industry. I think there is a when I started in the events industry, it was run by a very few big events agencies. And now that's not the world we live in. There are, I think, something north of 10,000 event agencies in the UK. And whilst we can't all be, best friends, and I get that, equally, I think if we can, the more we can share, we as an industry need to be working at best practice. We need to be, so the more we can share. So if anybody wants to contact me, I'm on LinkedIn, just drop me a note. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you. If anyone's battling with pricing or with how to pitch or whatever, then, I'm super happy to share the knowledge that I have for what it's worth. I think the tips for other event organizers is to really, really, really care about the outcome of the event, not about the next event next month, not about the profit of the event, not about who the client is it the right brand, can I go around telling people at cocktail parties that I've just worked with this amazing luxury brand. Not really care. Individual people walking through the door, what does that one guest walking through the door, what are they going to feel at the event? And if you can bring it down to that every single time, then I think you will be phenomenally successful.
Fantastic.
I hope. That's the theory anyway.
Fantastic. And I think that's a really great place to wrap this up. That thank you so much for coming on. That's been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think we say this often in terms of, we get a different view on these things, but that was just, I feel like we looked at that one through a completely different lens.
Yeah, absolutely. That was exactly what I was going to say. Like a really different perspective. It's great.
So thank you for listening and watching. We hope you enjoyed this. And if you did, please leave a review, like and subscribe. And most importantly, share this podcast with your colleagues and peers, whether they're fellow speakers or event organisers. And we'll be back soon with another episode. Thanks so much.